Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Dear students of 11th class subject Botany, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear students, you know that we have thrown light upon the status of virus, and we have also studied the general characteristic features of viruses. Now today we will study the classification of viruses. Regarding the classification of viruses, these viruses can be classified primarily on their phenotypic characteristics, core content, chemical composition, capsid structure, size, shape, genome structure, and mode of replication. So these are the core factors on the basis of which the classification of viruses has been made. So dear students, you should remember, you should understand that the classification of viruses has been made on their phenotypic characteristics, their core content, their chemical composition, their capsid structure, their size, their shape, their genome structure, and their mode of or modes of replication. So, dear students, these are the core factors on the basis of which the classification of viruses has been made. The Baltimore classification is the most commonly used for studying the system of virus classification. Here you should remember that a scientist whose name was Baltimore, he has classified the viruses on the basis of these above mentioned core factors. This system was developed by an American biologist whose name was David Baltimore in 1970s, for which he was awarded Nobel Prize. So dear students, the classification of viruses has been developed by an American biologist whose name was David Baltimore, and the year was 1970s, and on the basis of this he has been awarded a Nobel Prize. Now, taking all the factors on the basis of which the classification of viruses has been made, we will take these factors one by one. Classification based on the presence of nucleic acids. The nucleic acids present in the viruses, you know, are either RNA or DNA. So the classification based on the presence of nucleic acids, we will take this first of all. Regarding the classification based on the presence of nucleic acids, the first we will see that DNA virus. The viruses having DNA as its genetic material is called DNA virus. The DNA virus can be defined as a virus having DNA as its genetic material. The virus which has the genetic material as DNA is called the DNA virus. These are of two types. These are of two types. Number one, single-stranded DNA virus and double-stranded DNA virus. The single-stranded DNA virus examples are picornavirus and parvovirus. The single-stranded DNA virus examples are picornavirus and parvovirus. The double-stranded DNA virus examples are adenovirus and herpes virus. adenovirus and herpes virus. These are the two examples of double-stranded DNA virus. Now, the RNA virus. The virus having RNA as its genetic material is called RNA virus. The RNA virus can be defined as a virus having RNA as its genetic material. These RNA virus, like the DNA virus, are of two different types. One is the double-stranded RNA virus, while as another is the single-stranded RNA virus. The double-stranded RNA virus example is a Rio virus. The double-stranded RNA virus example is Rio virus, while as the single-stranded RNA virus examples are poliovirus, rabies virus, influenza virus, and hepatitis A. These are the different examples of single-stranded RNA viruses. So, the single-stranded RNA virus is further classified into two groups. The single-stranded RNA virus is further classified into two groups. One is called the positive sense RNA and another is called the negative sense RNA. Positive sense RNA is abbreviated as plus RNA, negative sense RNA as minus RNA. So this was all about today's lecture, the classification of virus. So dear students, you should now understand that the classification of viruses has been made by famous American biologist whose name was Baltimore, and this Baltimore classification is preliminary used for the classification of viruses, and this biologist has classified the viruses on the basis of phenotypic characteristics, core content, chemical composition, capsid structure, size, shape, and genome structure, and modes of replication. This system of classification was done in 1970s by this Baltimore American biologist on the basis on which he has been awarded a Nobel Prize. Now the classification based on the presence of nucleic acids is DNA virus and RNA virus. DNA virus is the virus having DNA as its genetic material, while as RNA virus is the virus having RNA as its genetic material. DNA virus example, DNA virus are of two types, single-stranded DNA virus and double-stranded DNA virus, whereas RNA virus is also of two different types, that is double-stranded RNA virus and single-stranded RNA virus. This RNA and the single-stranded RNA virus is further classified into two groups. One is the positive sense RNA and another is the negative sense RNA. So this was all about today's lecture. I hope you have understood now the classification of viruses made by this American biologist Baltimore. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you very much.